Alright, welcome all to today's programming, and unfortunately we have some tragic circumstances to discuss in the world today.
The situation, basically a dictatorship. Erdogan was threatening an invasion, obviously, of Israel, but in his eyes he sees that the Jewish state as the Nazis. Ironically, considering the founding of Israel and everything to do with the Jewish state, it's pretty ironic, especially considering, besides the obvious, they haven't actually tried to occupy other countries. Really, they haven't expanded their borders. And obviously the region's always in an uproar, but there's plenty of unpopulated area, so I never really understood. But the region is just great in this significance, I suppose. Anyways, in other news, the war might be spreading, but the US elections appear to be grinding on as the mainstream media is ramping up their attacks on the Republicans, and in a very biased manner, I might add, because you can see it's very obvious that they're doing this for the election and just to throw their weight around. And I don't know, it seems like an abuse of power to me, but that's just my take. But yeah, the media really shifts. And
Russia continues. It's become evident that Ukraine's bent on invading Russia, and they've been doing that in the Kursk region primarily as of late. And now with this invasion of Russia, Putin has been saying lately that this was a major, large-scale provocation, though it remains to be seen what that means. He has been sequestering more weapons, aid, and munitions, or large-scale munitions from Iran, a likely source of proxy terror in the future. And essentially, Russia's been sequestering up these arms for a long time to aid in their long drawn-out war effort. The Ukrainians, for their part, are trying to distract from the front lines in Ukraine that may not be doing so well. They're seeing gains, and they're turning the narrative against Russia with this new counter-Russian offensive, where they've gone and essentially they've plundered Russia with this incursion, likely drawing what resources they can out of this opportunity to invade Russian home territory. And Russia, for its part, does have a lacking in territorial integrity. Traitors because of these actions, but it's a fact that they let them into the territory of Russia, and once onto the Russian Federation's territory proper, they began to wreak economic and infrastructural havoc, with the Russians unable to sequester forces to the required locations, reverting to the use of airstrikes and other munitions on Russian soil, which is direct effect of this war, I feel like, on the civilian population, resorting to the use of incendiary bombs and airstrikes on Russian soil proves that Russia's military and fighting force is too weak to prevent a ground invasion into Russia, and that they have to cause this amount of destruction inside of the nation. It means that Russia's really a weak economy and a weak country. In many ways, spending all this money to fund a war, and they can still be invaded to this degree with this potency of an invading force. Ukraine obviously isn't being defeated as fast as Putin would like, and to see the fact that they're able to call up such a force to attack Russia, they're also hoping, of course, on the Ukrainians' part, to show NATO that these weapons they've received, to show the US that the money they've received from Congress has been put to use to create this exemplary fighting force. And of course, this will be put to the test further in the future. A lot of Ukraine is still devastated. Obviously, Ukraine has pockets like Kiev that have been less touched by the war, but even then we're talking about massive attrition, and those less touched areas will likely be seeing a little bit more action now as Russia seeks to hammer home and use these places as a mode of escalation. So Russia will be, as in the past, striking Kiev, I feel like, in retaliation. But right now they're just struggling to catch up. They're trying to divert forces just to make contact with the Ukrainian forces inside of Russia. And mainly, I believe this is primarily focused around the Kursk region. There's also been light conflict around the power plant there. From the stories that I've seen, Ukraine has not been able to hold it, but they've been actually in control of the grounds as of this morning. They've been outside, and it appears they do now have armed control over the Kursk nuclear power plant. And so this is just one front in the current instability of war that's been ravaging the planet. We also have the Middle East, and how that's just a powder keg that's ready to go up any day. Though Iran's hasn't made its attack yet, and it is likely that Iran will use its proxies for a majority of this to divert attention away from Iran proper. They're likely planning on using many proxy forces of the whole octopus of entangled proxy networks that make up the Iranian terror
network,
for the axis of evil. And so this is unfortunately inevitable. There will be an invasion of Israel by this axis of evil, these surrounding Sunni Arab countries, and they will form an alliance, these coalition nations of Iran. Well, ultimately they're all funded by Iran, that's why they're proxy nations. This will be a larger proxy war, a larger regional war, and potentially a larger war in general. I believe they will invade Israel, but Israel will have to stem off this tide of invasion easily with the powers that be. They're granted the ability to do so before an invading ground force could make inroads into the territories. Unlike what we see with Russia, Israel won't let the enemy build up on their border like this. They won't even allow an incursion of such nature. We see massive movements in terms of war and conflict around the world today, and widespread instability. We can only hope that this escalation tampers down and they put a cap on it. Hopefully the future will have less war and conflict, but we can only hope for today. And I hope you all enjoyed this podcast episode. Thank you for watching. If you do enjoy this, consider hitting the subscribe and bell button down below, and leave me a comment. I'd like to know what you think. So essentially, we have these current conflicts and many more around the world. North Korea has been flexing its muscle. To be honest, China as well to a degree, but we can see that China is desperate to start a war of its own for Taiwan, and they're just waiting for the opportunity.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this informative content, consider subscribing. Stay informed and up to date on the current global events as they transpire, and don't be left in the dark when these things happen. Currently a lot's going on in the world, and it can be a very stressful time for people, so it's important that you take time to unwind and relax, and don't take these situations in the world to heart unless you live in one of these countries or a country that's at future risk of war. And thank you for watching. I hope you all have a good morning, and I'll catch you all around in the next one. Be sure to like, subscribe. Peace. One last final note. This is an update as the news just broke. Russia has declared a federal state of emergency in Russia, and he's labeling the operation to counter invading forces of Ukraine as terrorists, framing this as a counter-terrorism operation. similar to calling the war in Ukraine a special military operation.